right, welcome back. It's another edition of the Empty the Bench 2023. Tom Albano here along with Nick Morgasen. As always, let's get everything out of the way. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you get notified of everything here at the Empty the Bench Network. Make sure to follow us across social media, Facebook, X, and Instagram at ETB Sports. Make sure to follow the Podcast Network, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at ETB Network. Make sure to go youtube.com/ETB Network. Hit that subscribe button. Especially, we've just passed over 650 subscribers. We thank you all for your support, and we're going to hope to continue climbing. And I especially ask of this for those of you who are listening on the audio forms, Acast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and so much more. If you are listening on those platforms, make sure to come over to our YouTube home. If you're watching us here on YouTube, don't forget to take Empty the Bench on the road with you, and you can listen on those audio-only platforms. And don't forget to go to etbpodcast.com for more about the network, blogs from some of our contributors, and so much more. Make sure to follow me and Nick on our own social medias at N Morgasen Radio and at Thomas J. Albano, respectively. All right. A lot that we got to get into here with the best of Empty the Bench 2023, because the first half of the year was fun, was a little bit, but now things really kicked off a notch when we started from July.
Yeah, this was an interesting second half of the year. We had some great interviews along the way. Obviously, it started in July. Dame Lillard being traded, one of the biggest trades that was announced in the NBA, obviously was a Portland Trailblazer for his whole career. And he wasn't like a blowing the waves like James Harden is, which we'll get to later on. I think Dame it was time. He needed to go to a playoff team that was going to win, but nobody expected him to end up in Milwaukee with Giannis.
No, absolutely not. I mean, we had this little debate about will he or won't he, and we'll get into the fact that he did get traded later on in another segment here on the best event of the bench. But our first clip for at least the July portion is us debating about will he actually be traded to the Miami Heat, because there was all that talk about the Heat, Dame Lillard and his agent obviously throwing out those little hints that they would only accept the Heat. Dame Lillard making those social media comments like it was on Instagram Live about joining Miami.
The Miami music,
right? And he got the big no from the NBA.
Well, and for people who don't 100% understand that in the NBA circle, the NBA had to step in because his agent was telling other teams, like, don't trade for me, I won't accept it. So basically, he was cornering the market on purpose, which is a no in the NBA.
I mean, if we want to talk about the NBA and collusion, that's a whole other debate. But regardless, well, we start things off talking about Dame Lillard and will he or won't be traded to Miami Heat. And then we get into a couple of other big stories, which involves two guests that we had on the show. One being AJ Perez of Front Office Sports, who we've had at least like 2 or 3 times now on this network.
More. Yeah.
You would say even more, yeah. He's been a recurring name that's appeared on our show for a couple of years now. And we were with him because ESPN had just went through a whole big section of layoffs.
And this is not the first time. They had 300 layoffs quite a few years ago. We covered that story when it broke. Then it happened again. And we're not talking about behind the scenes. The original 300 was behind the scenes. This was actual big name talent. Now, what people don't understand, and that's why I asked AJ the question of, is this just a tax write-off? Because that's essentially what it was. All these talent are getting paid. It's just the earlier they do it, the bigger the tax break they get from writing off against it.
Jeff Van Gundy, Susie Colbert, Jalen Max Kellerman, Keyshawn Johnson. Well, Nick, the clips that we have here are going to focus on, well, on your end, the radio end. It seems like ESPN Radio is hitting the, well, you know what? If it wasn't dead already, it's practically dead at this point. And then for me on the TV end, going on something which we learned when we took that course ago, when we read that book about ESPN. We always mention the book. That content over commentators. They don't care who's in the booth as long as they have the content.
Well, the one debate I would make is Well, so like a Joe Buck in the NFL booth might make a difference,
Right.
or um, Mike Breen, who
At the
does
end of the day.
even though he does the Knicks locally for MSG, he does the national telecast until they got rid of Mark Jackson and Jeff Van Gundy, which was a big mistake by the NBA, and they replaced it. Now I like oh, why am I forgetting her name all of a sudden? Burke, Doris
Yeah.
Burke, but I don't like Doc Rivers in the booth, at all. Like I don't want to hear the like his voice. Like you can't. It sounds like he has no voice. Like it's kind of nuts. But we get into it with AJ Perez, TV, radio. I basically had a nerding out session on top of it.
But
Then
then,
then we get into the whole Northwestern investigation. And when we say investigation, I think that's putting it lightly, right?
yeah, I mean, all the drama that happened there, yeah, and with the hazing controversy, who was hazed? Was it just players? Was it more than players? How much did Gerald actually know? Did he fail to report? And all the firing that happened, and then Pat Fitzgerald making that statement,
And then
and
he sued the school.
right. So it was just never ending drama with that. So we got so actually we had a couple of guests, I should say, because the real person we had the guest with was Bradley Locker, the co-editor in chief of Inside NU, one of the local outlets over there at
He
Northwestern.
And by the way, like everyone's gonna say that what is his name? Adam Rittenberg for ESPN, or like they broke the story, so to speak. I
Bradley.
I would give Bradley a bunch of credit because he was on
Mhm.
the inside of the walls following this story. Like people are not giving him enough credit for the amount of investigative hard work. And you know this, like I know broadcasting radio, you know journalism, you know the amount of work that it
Yeah.
takes to do an investigative story on the journalism side. People think it's just like, oh, go talk to people, interview people, write a story. No, you got to get all that stuff sourced and confirmed, and like that's a lot of work.
A lot of work.
But and I think like he got picked up by a few websites now. Like that story put him on the map, like big time.
Right. And then Zan Bando, my co-host on the MMA Outsiders, as a Northwestern alumnus, because he went to grad school there, he also joined in to discuss the match.
Yeah, it was a unique story to say the least, and I think we spent quite a few weeks because there was so many
Yeah.
headlines
So,
coming out of it.
there was points where it's just us talking, then I was talking with Bradley, and then some follow-up stories that was just us. So Northwestern, one of the bigger stories that we had during this year. Other stories that we kind of talked about in the July and August portion, the depressed running back market, that Zoom call that all the running backs had,
The
where the running back
Saquon Barkley leading it.
right, Saquon, but you had several running backs who were kind of, but let's just say the running back position in general was starting to fight against the NFL. We have Dan Snyder selling the Washington Commanders. Hallelujah.
By the way, even though like we're all happy about that, talk about the insane return.
Right.
I think that was a story of the year, which we didn't really have a chance to put on this list. Owners who spent this much money and made this much money.
I think we do talk about it in that clip, though. The whole debacle that starts between Jim Irsay and Jonathan Taylor as part of the depressed running back market, by the way.
People with glass houses should not throw stones. That's the best way I can put Jim Mercer.
Other quick things just to note: the Mets selling deadline, the controversy of the Orioles suspending their announcer Kevin Brown for stating facts.
That ownership group is a joke, and that's why I think Karma Cup came back and got them in the playoffs. To be honest,
Uh, the whole conference realignment where we talk about the end of the Pac-12, and considering Nick, that as of the day we're recording this which is December 22nd, Florida State is now going to be leaving ACC and is
well,
placing lost.
it's being reported. We don't know exactly as of yet, but there's a huge lawsuit going down between FSU suing the ACC. We'll get you more of that in the new year.
Considering what we talk about, I don't think we talked about it. Considering what we talked about a couple months ago, Nick, about Florida State missing out and the whole idea of the Power Five, and now it's even more restricted. It's just going to get worse from here.
It's all about the money.
Right. But you're basically about to turn college sports. I mean, we've already turned it into professional sports, but it's like
NIL.
no, no. What I'm talking about is that the lower conferences are starting to not matter, and now that's stretching even to the lower part of the power conferences. It's like soon it's like there's only going to be like 2 or 3 conferences at this rate we're going.
It's basically 1, 2, and 3, and everybody else. But that's been college football for years. They just didn't want to admit it to themselves. Why do you think
now it's a reality?
Why do you think the large teams spend money to put crappy teams on their schedule, even though it really doesn't help them with the college committee and the rankings? But they want wins, even though they're paying these teams like $40 million.
The start of the whole James Harden, Daryl Morey throwdown. I mean, I shouldn't even say start. This is bad blood that's been going on for years, but it really hit a stride. And then, of course,
is a liar.
Oh, that'll live in infamy forever. Though that was obviously James Harden in China with, what was it, Nike or Reebok? I think it was Reebok, actually. Basically, he was talking to a whole group in China, basically say Daryl Morey is a liar because he wouldn't give him a contract that he supposedly was promised. Now, we all know how the business works. Just because you're promised until you sign your name on the dotted line and you shake hands, nothing is official. So James Harden's a baby.
And then Wander Franco.
This, and I don't know if you agree with me or not, this got to the level a little bit of Kaepernick when it, like, the amount of media attention it got.
I don't know if I can agree, only because I feel like the Kaepernick story, was a little bit more than just the sport, and it went over to mainstream political news. This didn't get to that level, but the way that it took over social media was absolutely insane. Even with a rumor before any of the reports were officially out by the mainstream media, the news kind of just completely shattered X.
If you remember correctly, it was a foreign language post. If you remember, I forgot if it was the girl who was reporting, or what, the family. I think it was the family reporting that they supposedly okayed it because technically it was underage. And like once it broke, then we saw MLB was not reacting to it right away. They didn't know what to do. Good old Rob Manfred. And then we finally see Tampa Bay starting to remove the posters, but they weren't saying he was off the team, if you remember that.
Right. Now, technically, he's not on the restricted list right now, but that's because the season's over. There is it's like the injured list where it goes away once the season ends. The assumption is that once spring training gets back up and going, he's going to go back on the restricted list.
People forget that the Rays bought out all his arbitration years and gave him a large deal. People forget that.
And that's going to be a contract that, if the worst comes to the worst, like what was reported, which we talked about, Wander Franco very unlikely to play again. I have to double check who was the original reporter on that.
On which story? The Franco story?
The one very unlikely to play in MLB again.
Oh, that was the guy that retweeted the thing that we put out.
Yeah, I
think it was
Hector Gomez. Hector Gomez.
He's huge, like in that circle. Like he broke that story like right away. Like, and he hasn't played since. So obviously he must know something.
Yeah. So take a look. We'll come back and we'll talk about the September and October portion of this best of.
Happy New Year!
The Trailblazers trying to bring pieces in. They draft Scoot Henderson. They're now full. Their roster's full of guards, which is another problem. And now we come to the report from Chris Haynes that Damian Lillard is interested in a move to the Heat. And Lillard and Trailblazers GM dispute report. Well, we've heard this for the last 3 years, 4 years. Make up your mind, please.
I will not believe Damian Lillard is interested in another team or another team is interested. I'm not going to believe any of that. You know what I'm going to believe that when Damian Lillard is in another uniform, because it feels like at this point, because I mean, it was just not that long ago that Damian Lillard said gave some sort of indication that he was happy being in Portland and wanted to be a trailblazer for life.
I mean, they have Jimmy Butler. They have Bam Adebayo.
Mm-hmm. I mean, they have a good team. They have a good team. I think Damian Lillard's going to be a fantastic addition, but but that means there's going to have to be some trading, and I just don't know. And Lillard himself, along with the general manager of the Trailblazers, disputed Chris Haynes' report and said, no, that's not true.
Well, no, and then the GM doubled down on it, saying we're trying to build a championship around Lillard. Hey, you want to know what I thought when I heard that?
Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying? Oh my God! Stop you fucking lying!
This GM can't do shit. This team is not going anywhere. And the few times that they were the number one seed, they got upset.
That's what was reported, a couple weeks ago that they're getting rid of the morning show, and that was Keyshawn, that was Kellerman, and Jay Williams. Once we heard of those rumblings, it was. I mean, look back when ESPN Radio launched with Tony Bruno and all these huge hosts. Back when I was in college. Oh, that's how old I am. So it was such a beacon back then, and it's kind of. We saw ESPN magazine go away. I think we're seeing ESPN radio go the same way. It's sad. I think while their podcasts are sure doing well, I think ESPN radio. I think they're trying to figure out what's going to work there. And I think the cost cutting we've seen it has hit radio. And a lot of people people don't know. A lot of people behind the scenes production people. When shows get canceled, doesn't matter radio or TV, a lot of people who work in production also lose their jobs. And so that's that wasn't a part of this 20 on-air talent list that was let go today, but they've been doing that for a few years now. Jeff Van Gundy being let go was like the biggest name early in the day, and I didn't see that one coming. That was not one of the names that I had heard. There's been names floating about for many weeks. And that's kind of he's a lead analyst during cover the NBA finals. It's like you think that he would that he'd be safe, but no, and he's great at his job. I think there are a lot of the reaction I saw today in social media was like Jeff Van Gundy. Obviously, I think people are gonna said they miss them, and I think Steve Young's up there too as well. And it's people are they're gonna move on with other talent. ESPN still has a deep roster of talent. I think we're going to see a bigger role for Mina Kimes and some others, and Doris Burke on the NBA side, stepping up. I think we really don't know how it's going to shake out, but they do still have a deep roster of talent. And I think a lot of some of the names we didn't see today, possibly it could have been, there are a lot of behind the scenes renegotiating of contracts. I've talked to one person who I had on the list, and that person was like, we'll see, or I'm trying to renegotiate. This was a lot of people who had years left on their deals. So that's going to be, they have to, eat a lot of that, depending on the contract language. They have to eat a lot of that money. I'm sure there's a buyout provision in some of these contracts as well. That'll save them money, but you're also losing talent. I mean, we see other layoffs where people can't work until their contract's over. It's kind of like it's almost like I wouldn't say it's an accounting gimmick. It's the way corporations work.
He has a responsibility to know what was happening in his program. And I believe President Schill also said the same thing in his statement regarding why Fitzgerald was fired. And regarding the Shrek clap, the former player that I talked to said that he saw the Shrek clap done by Fitzgerald multiple times. I believe he said it happened actually frequently. That it was kind of a long, slow clap over one's head. The player did say that he was unsure how Fitzgerald was using it in terms of whether it was going to signify to a player that he was going to be involved in running, but whether or not the player told me he did see it occur multiple times, which again corroborates what the initial reports were from the Daily Northwestern. So again, I think it's pretty clear in some capacity that Fitzgerald was aware of what was happening, whether or not one wants to believe the Shrek clap allegations. But the bottom line is that he, again, oversaw every single aspect of Northwestern football. He had a responsibility to know what was happening in his own locker room, even outside of the program, and especially for fostering a workplace workplace environment in which players felt comfortable doing this with one another. And I think that's the bottom line. And I think that's what some people are failing to understand, that even if Fitzgerald didn't know, he needed to have known. We did not hear anything on the media side really until the investigation summary was released. We had no idea that the punishment was going to be 2 weeks for Fitzgerald, nor the conclusions, what they were going to be, that hazing was found to have occurred in the program, but notably that Fitzgerald did not know. He had an opportunity to know, is effectively what Maggie Hickey, the lead investigator, determined. And again, there was radio silence from the time this investigation started in December. We didn't even know it was occurring until January, had no idea the results were going to be announced in early July. And then I think everything really opened in terms of the floodgates when the Daily Northwestern's groundbreaking story, which featured I believe 2 former players, one of whom was the whistleblower, just detailing, again, the very graphic and severe nature of these allegations of hazing, which you guys kind of outlined already. And then I think additional reporting kept coming in. We heard from multiple former staffers. I believe that was Wildcat Report talked to multiple former staffers confirming these behaviors had occurred. I heard from multiple former players that said that they saw these behaviors, and one even told me that this was happening as early as the time he was there, and he graduated in 2007. And then, of course, there was additional reporting which factored in the element of racism, which my co-editor-in-chief, Iggy Dowling, spoke to a player about that. The Daily Northwestern had a story about that. And I think that's kind of the timeline and how it was accelerated starting on Saturday with the Daily Northwestern. And then more players certainly felt comfortable coming forward, and very grateful to those players that were courageous enough to speak up and share their stories, because, of course, it's not an easy thing to do, especially with a coach who was as beloved as Fitzgerald. Greg was hired in May 2021 after another very controversial hiring process involving scandals and harassment from Mike Polisky, who was in line to be the next athletic director, had been hired and had to step down very shortly thereafter because of his knowing of and basically dismissing of claims of sexual harassment from Northwestern cheerleaders. So that hire was already mired in controversy. And I think in Greg's 2 years at the school, of course, there has been success with women's sports, lacrosse, field hockey, winning national titles. But when you consider the fact that he likely enabled coaches to create, as you guys mentioned, toxic, abusive cultures in not just one sport, but 2 that are very notable, football, of course, being the most prominent and revenue driving, it definitely makes one wonder how much Greg knew, why he was not stepping in or checking in with players on both sides of the programs involved. And apparently, according to 670 The Score, when Greg conducted the HR investigation regarding Jim Foster, he did not speak to any players whatsoever. And again, that it makes one just curious why that was the case, because you would figure the players would have the most up-to-date, pertinent information about the situation. So lots of questions swirling about Greg. And of course, there's a question whether or not he's going to remain as the AD too.
Pat Fitzgerald originally was not going to be fired. He was suspended for 2 weeks.
Unpaid. Yeah.
Unpaid, yes. The coach said he was, quote, very disappointed and was, quote, not aware of the alleged incidents, which again goes over to the, again, why you make the paternal argument comparison,
Yeah.
I should say.
I mean, there's a lot of problems here. One is, again, that Fitzgerald is going to try to play the victim and say, I didn't know anything. Now, here's the problem. We don't know what he exactly knows. We don't know, not that it matters. If he knew anything, he should have been fired. And and by the way, I was talking to some people about this story too, because the president needs to be held accountable also.
Oh, yeah. Well, you say that, and listen to this. Okay, so first of all, this is the other part I was referring to before. The university said in the executive summary, it didn't find sufficient evidence to conclude that the coaching staff knew about ongoing hazing activity, but said, quote, there had been significant opportunities to discover and report the hazing conduct. Ultimately, what it goes down to is, which even the president, Michael Schill, says in his statement after the firing, that ultimately Coach Fitzgerald is responsible for what goes on in that program, ignorance or not.
Agree. But the president needs to be held accountable for not, because I guarantee you these things were going on a lot longer than we knew. It's funny how that works, right? I mean, he buys in and then he's an asshole, but he walks away with $6 billion. So he's fined $60 million for the cheerleader sexual harassment scandal, largest fine in NFL history, by the way.
Yes, largest fine in NFL history, but at the same time, I'm still going to call it some sort of slap because, look, he gets fined That's like 1% of his net worth. It's not much at the
So basically,
right. Everything that he has done, all the lines he has crossed, and you harass all these women. You basically, you know what? I'll just flat out use the term. You pimp them out to all your boosters and supporters. And look what happens. You just get fined $60 million. It is the return of two checks Goodell.
yeah, I mean, he doesn't care. $6 billion later, he's basically go hide under a rock for the rest of his life. Yep, Roger Goodell strikes again. I mean, he doesn't care. He won. By the way, we have to give Roger Goodell some credit.
Yeah, because you know what? And the vote to transition from Snyder to Harris was a unanimous vote. I think at this point, I'm willing to take the $60 million fine and the little slap on the wrist for the sake of he has sold the group and he is out of our heads forever.
If you look at the running backs, it's like a car crash waiting to happen every time they run into the pile. Like, and I hate to say that, but it's true. It's the most physically crushing position out of everything.
Here's the thing. On one hand, I feel bad because you think about the running backs. Like, think about those names that were in the Zoom call. Now, obviously, Christian McCaffrey's got his contract.
So does Nick Chubb.
So does Nick Chubb. But you think about the Saquon Barkleys. You think about, I know Austin Eckler agreed to certain terms, like he got a little extra pay, but it'll be $2 million of incentives, and then he gets to be a free agent next season. But still, you got to feel bad, feel like maybe he's a little underpaid. Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, like Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard didn't get a deal. He got to play under the tag.
He was happy to take the tag because he knew that his money in his depressing market was going to go down.
My favorite YouTuber and tree before. And I think, honestly, he has a point when this is something that I mentioned to you in our pre-show meeting. Part of the problem is the days of the bell cow back seem to be over. And the days the day of the pocket passer quarterback is over. Look at Lamar Jackson. We bring up the Giants and Falcons. Look at Daniel Jones. These are guys who scramble out of the pocket and are willing to take the
abuse.
Take the abuse and go for it themselves.
I think the example I used to you was Eli Manning and cement feet. Like you're not going to see that anymore. If you have a quarterback that's cement feet and can't even move a little, you're not going to get drafted out into the NFL anymore because you need guys that can move. What you mentioned before, like Lamar, or even Patrick Mahomes can move his feet, even though that's not his game, but he can do it. Shut the program down. The sports department needs to be shut down. I don't understand what these colleges do not understand. It's got to go and be shut down. This is unbelievable. I mean, this situation has gone, like I said, gone from bad to worse to horrifying. Now we're getting accusations from coaches on top of players. We're getting lawsuits all over the place. Shut it down.
And yet Schill and Greg are still here. Yes, Schill and Greg. I cannot believe that President Schill at Northwestern actually had the cojones to come out and make a statement and say, I still support Greg. I still support our current athletic director, and I am not going to fire.
So you support hazing and sexual abuse allegations is basically what he's saying.
The volleyballer who's suing, regardless of what the outcome is, has a point in that the university's response to these hazing allegations, be it in volleyball or in the football program, the baseball, that the toxic culture that has been developed at this university is just too much. Basically, you are right in saying that maybe it is best for the sake of this program and its reputation that there is no 2023-2024 athletic season. The problem you're going to have, and Bradley talked about this with us a couple weeks ago, is that they're a Big Ten school. The Big Ten, the NCAA, especially with one of their babies in the Big Ten, are not going to see a program shut down. I understand what they're trying to do because they want to rebuild their farm system. However, what baffles me was Epler's comments to Max Scherzer, where, according to Scherzer, basically Epler told them, we're not even going to look at 2024. We're going to look at 25 and 26. The kind of return you got, especially for all the money that you threw around, willing to pay for people into next year like Scherzer, and you're only going to get a few prospects. You could just basically go buy the free agents with all the money you have.
You know why they're punting? Because even though Cohen has all that money, he still has to pay all that money that's left over from all these contracts. So I guess he's trying to get the money off the books, and that's why Epler was saying, hey, we're punting on at least 24 because we don't have the room. Jim Irsay, let's put it this way. He shouldn't be throwing stones at glass houses because of his own situation. Him and his DUIs and his... He's not the... let's see, what's the best word I can use? Character. He's not the best of character.
I can't take anything back that I said last week. Yeah, the running back market is depressed. The days of the cow are done. The days of the pocket passing quarterback exclusively are done. That being said, I feel like the Colts have more to lose without Jonathan Taylor than the Giants did without Saquon Barkley, than the Raiders do without Josh Jacobs, more than maybe the Chargers do without Austin Eckler, because Jonathan Taylor, by far, is the best player on that Colts team.
Agreed.
And it, like I said, this whole Colts team is so young and developing. It's going to take a couple of years for them. As trash as their division is, if you're the Colts, you need to continue to develop. And if you want a fighting shot, you really think you have a fighting shot, you need a guy like Jonathan Taylor. So
first of all, I don't think the Colts are a good team. Let's just be real.
No,
I mean, and like anyone who's would Jonathan Taylor make them a presentable team that could go for a playoff spot? Yes, they would be presentable. That's the word I would use. I wouldn't say that they're...
It's like when I always defended Barkley for years, is that football is part business and you need that star. Jonathan Taylor is that star.
They're talking about how it makes their TV contract, because technically I was reading the ACC has a TV contract through 2037.
Yeah, but I think you and I are going to get to the same point, and that some of these conferences now, how conferences were always in regions, and now it's all scattered all over the United States.
We're talking about cross-country trips if Cal and Stanford ended up in the ACC. That's what would happen. And you're going to put the burden on these students. Now, let me be careful with that, because what's burden on the students with NIL when they're getting paid anyway?
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up, because here's the thing, and the thing that I'm most concerned about with these alignments, and it was my concern also with NILs and pay for these athletes. We're always looking at it in the context of football, because football is the sport that brings in all the revenue, and basketball as well. But think about this. With football, it's only one game a week, one road trip that you got to make a week. What about the baseball and softball teams who got to play all over, who have road trips, throughout the months of March and April and May? What about, the soccer teams who have to make some road trips? I'm like trying to think of all the different sports. What about, say, hockey and the road trips sometimes they'll have to make?
I mean, they're not thinking of it that way, unfortunately. They're thinking...
I know, but I'm saying, usually when you had to deal with, I'll give you an example with the school that I went to, Ryder, and the one that we shared with Hofstra, that, when it's very cold up here, obviously they always played down in the south and around the country in March when in places where the weather was warmer. Now you're talking about late March, early April for those baseball and softball teams when they're playing within their conferences, the opponents they do have to play. You had the advantage of being in the region. Now there's a chance you'll have to go across the country and back. Yeah, you're talking about, you can say, oh, but they got the NILs and such. Yeah, that's good and maybe understandable with the football team. But what about the guys in the sports that have less revenue? That's really unfair on them.
Okay. I'm sure you've heard me say this before, and I'm going to say it again. They don't care. All they care about is one thing. You and I watched this video 10 times, waiting for some kind of dark, decrepit thing to be said. There was not one horrible thing said in what he said.
Because there was nothing. There was nothing offensive said. He was just stating fact. And somebody in the Orioles organization, whether it be in the front office or good old John Angelos, who's the day-to-day operator of the team, or hell, maybe even the 90-something-year-old Peter Angelos, said something to John. Basically, somebody had a hissy fit. Somebody had a temper tantrum like a little 2-year-old, and basically got Kevin Brown thrown off of the air. And by the way, it wasn't even criticism. It was that the last couple of years they had struggled to drop, and that this year they have done so much better. Like I said, to the point where now they and the Rays are competing for the top spot in the American League East, that they managed to close the gap on, when the Rays went on that early stretch during the opening season, those winning ways, we said, okay, nobody's going to catch the Rays. That it's the division to the win. It's their division to win. And now all of a sudden, the Orioles have now swooped in, and now we got a 2-team race. He was praising the team, and he got suspended indefinitely for it.
I mean, this is what I like to call the politics of sports, where basically an owner is mad because he doesn't like what is being said about his team, even though he said nothing negative about the team. Those graphics are probably made an hour to 2 hours in advance. And I agreed with you, if you're going to go after the broadcaster who's on TV and you're going to suspend him, you got to suspend the color person, you got to suspend the director, the AP, the broadcasting truck. You might as well suspend everybody on Masson if that's the case.
You might as well just get interns to run your broadcast for a week or something like that.
People are concerned. And by the way, everyone should be concerned. It doesn't matter what country you're in. This is morally, we talk about this all the time, morally and ethically wrong in every way, shape, or form. I don't care who you are. I don't care if people are going to say, like, for older relationships, to say age is only a number. No, it's not age is only a number. This is a grooming situation.
This is also not the first time this season that we've had a controversy involving Wander Franco. You think back to, I think it was June, a couple of months ago at least, when Kevin Cash benched him for 2 games. Supposedly it was due to some sort of management issue.
Anger issue.
Yeah, supposedly some sort of anger issue, locker room issue, and basically saying that Wander Franco needed to basically be a better teammate. Now, granted, a locker room issue where you're benched for a game or 2 and this are 2 different completely things. It's apples and oranges. I'm just saying that it's not the first time this season that Wander Franco's name has popped up in not a good light. The whole point of the recent development is it's now not one allegation. There's a second allegation here. So the fact that we've got this second allegation now spurs even more questions, in my opinion. And is there going to be multiple of these kinds of cases? Because nobody had an idea about the second one until the Attorney General came out with that statement on Monday night.
Where is the Rob Manfred statement? That's what I want to know.
Again, well, here's what I'm going to say. Number one, you're not going to get anything from Rob Manfred because this is a negative story. What have we talked about? When it's negative on baseball, it's Major League Baseball.
I really don't care, to be honest. Rob Manfred's got to respond. I'm tired of when these situations happen and we don't hear anything from the commissioner in charge.
In all fairness, MLB, the Rays, and Franco, as you said, all agreed that he goes on the restricted list. At this point, the Rays had the roster spot freed up, so they were able to make a call up. They were able to go on with their season. And at this point, there's not much we can do because, the Rays and the league are investigating, but part of this, because of this legal matter of this, because it's a grooming, because it's a pedophilia kind of situation, it's not just these two. These two parties, the Rays and the MLB, that can do it. They also got to work with the authorities, the actual DR authorities.
DR, U.S. authorities, they got to work with everybody. And I don't know. Rob Manfred's got to make a statement. We clown on Roger Goodell for the punishments he gives. At least he makes a statement when something happens.
In other words, you're saying Manfred at least has to come out as the supposed executive face of baseball to say something about it for the sake of.
Yeah,
I don't know if I can say the integrity of the game because this is a situation. This is a situation that goes past the game.
This goes way beyond baseball, way beyond moral and ethical compound at this point. This is the clown in charge needs to make a statement because what are you going to do about this? And because you didn't say anything, the PR effed up. The Kevin Cash, which I agree with you partially what you said about Kevin Cash, but Kevin Cash looked like an idiot. And it's 100% true why he opted into the contract. He was told, hey, make it easier for us. Take the opt-in in-house. Accept the option. We'll trade you. And hopefully we can find a trade partner. He wanted to go to the Clippers.
Yeah.
And
there is an update that I actually forgot to post to our social media that actually recently came out the other day. Apparently, James Harden is so done with Daryl Morey because originally his stance over the weekend was Clippers or bust. Apparently, there's a report that that stance has now softened, and at this point, it's anywhere but the Sixers.
Gee, I wonder why. Because if it hasn't worked for Damian Lillard so far with the Miami Heat, why would you take the same stance? It makes no sense. And I'm laughing about this because it is so ridiculous with the All-Stars in the NBA.
Does some of this bad blood stretch back to the failed run that the Rockets had in Houston in the 2010s?
I don't know if it's bad blood. It's that James Harden, I guess, felt hurt or used, if that's the best way to put it, because he thought he was going to get a max deal, which, by the way, let's be clear about something. James Harden is not worth a max deal at all, by any stretch of the imagination. By the way, none of these guys are worth the money they pay for. Let's just be upfront and honest with this whole thing right now. Okay? So, James Harden's a jerk. Let's just put it out there. Okay? We know this. He's requested to be traded. What is it? The fourth time I think he's been requested to be traded now. So, from OKC to Houston, from Houston to Brooklyn.
And Brooklyn to Philadelphia.
Yeah, so 4 times, I think. So, it's like the boy who cried wolf.
Oh, the picture on the Instagram post that has been taken down. But the thing is, it's being investigated still by the Dominican authorities. So we're still dealing with a very legal and very serious kind of situation. So
let me give you one more. They've removed all the shrink wrap stuff out of the stadium. Did you see that?
Yeah, and here's the thing. Let's say in a best case scenario for Wander Franco, all of this proves to be untrue and he comes back into Major League Baseball. I still think listen, even in that kind of scenario, I still think if you're the Rays, what you're doing about removing all this stuff is still the correct thing to do because you don't know how long he's going to be absent. It could be he's back as soon as next season. It could be as long as he's never around ever again. So you're in a situation where basically the Rays have to prepare for a worse. They have to prepare for a future without Wander Franco. And if somehow he comes back and plays Major League Baseball again, then you get him again. But at this point, the Major League Baseball season is not going to stop just because Wander Franco is...
Oh, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying the Major League Baseball season is going to stop and the Rays season is not going to stop. But you need to cut bait. You need to cut bait. You need to move on. You need to void this contract. Because even if he comes back, and they say, okay, well, he didn't do whatever, it's a damaged reputation and you don't want to deal with it.
Now, but here's the thing, Nick. And again, we talked about this with Tatis. We talked about this with the Bowers thing. If whatever moral clause or whatever, like let's say none of this holds up, and you say cut anyway, I don't think the moral clause is going to go in, which means you are going to have to pay Wander Franco still over that decade or so. That's money the Rays are going to have to eat. And I don't know if, if the Rays can't get out of the contract, they're screwed. All right, now moving on to the months of September and October. Break from the craziness, but still some pretty big stories that were going around. Obviously, Nick, the saga of Mr. RELAX. Wait a minute, I shouldn't be doing that.
RELAX
comes to an end after only about, 4 plays, almost like about a minute of game time, and then he goes down with an Achilles injury.
Basically, they said there were people who walked in late to the game and didn't even see it. So, people were the whole stadium was depleted and depressed, and they said some fans what's the problem? And you're just 2 minutes too late, missing Aaron Rodgers tearing his ACL, and or Achilles, and basically. Just a little update to the story. He went on the Pat McAfee show and said, "I'm not ready." Gee, Aaron, did you ever think you were coming back?
Shocker.
Did you?
You're 38-year-old man who had a torn Achilles. Did you really think? Did you think that there was just an easy cure that you could be immunized from this Achilles tear?
I mean, it is what it is, and he says though that apparently he wants to come back for at least 2 more years.
Well, he's getting one more with the Jets. Where he's going to get the second one, I don't know.
He should go back to Green Bay.
But you know what? He didn't tear his ACL. I had to correct you there. But Shohei Ohtani tore his UCL, and he still got a bag during the season. But that's for the November-December segment.
I mean, I don't get it. This guy is like a cat. He's got 9 lives. He just keeps winning, and he won the
Well,
MVP
it's
this
easy,
year.
Nick, it's easy when you're the first two-way. It's like Babe Ruth. It's easy when you're good at both hitting and pitching. And it's easy when you can get some sympathy because you played in MLB's version of Siberia.
Well, yeah. And by the way, I will still fight that Rookie of the Year battle that we had way back when. That Miguel Andujar, who had the doubles record at the time, and everyone was like, well, Shohei Ohtani's a two-way player, and that's why he should win. Okay.
Well, Shohei is going to be like Mike Trout, where he's just going to be the default MVP. But, I mean, he definitely earned it. What you think about that award, he definitely earned it for 2023, winning that MVP.
Yeah, he's insane. He's a sick player.
Right. He is sick. I think the whole thing was about that Andujar situation was that he got hurt in the middle of his pitching. So some of that two-way player, I guess, was a little fragile. But that's because it was also something that we hadn't seen at the time. Now here we are, 2023, and he's coming off of 2.5 to 3.5 years where he's delivered as a two-way player.
Right. And not
it is
being
concerning.
able to pitch.
Right, but that's the thing. It is concerning that this is his second UCL tear.
Well, I think I've said this to you many times. I think we both agreed on it. The more surgeries you have, the odds of you recovering are not as great. But apparently he's recovered from both, and he managed to get $700 million. So
good on him.
But I don't think he'll be the MVP, though, this coming year, because he doesn't have the pitching aspect, and that's what everyone is clamoring for, the two-way player.
Well, we'll see. I mean, he could still hit. I just hope he doesn't hurt himself even further trying to be a couple of basketball headlines. A couple of basketball headlines. Obviously, we got still some stuff about James Harden. The Clippers continuing to pursue the trade even after the 76ers shut it down. Harden returning to see, and we talked about, and we kind of called it only for him to get traded, and then the Kevin Porter arrest, which was not good.
Yeah, that was a bad situation, and she almost, or I think she actually declined charges, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Well, you're talking about I can never pronounce her name.
Gondrezic.
Yeah. They're claiming that Porter never hit her, which was, it's two separate parts, one September and October, but the story is there.
That whole thing was a mess, and I think the because it was in New York, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So the NYPD was investigating. There were some issues with the investigation. The NBA, I don't think they did anything, or maybe they gave him a small suspension. I can't remember. But the NBA has a problem with domestic violence. And that used to be an NFL thing. Now the NBA, I think, is the new leader in domestic violence.
Well, MLB also has its issue, and that comes up in this segment with Julio Urias getting a domestic violence arrest, and that marked the end of his tenure with the Dodgers. And I mean, he's scheduled to be a free agent. He is a free agent today, I should say, but he ain't getting another contract.
I mean, it's not the first rodeo for the Dodgers. Trevor Bauer. I mean,
right. Well, it's sick to say, but Nick, again, as of the day we are recording this, December 22nd, I was just listening to the K download record leading. And now that the Yankees have lost out on Yamamoto, there are a couple of callers who are saying, well, do they take a chance and go after Bauer? And I'm like, hell no.
I don't care if he's the next coming of, well, I don't want to say that because I don't want to put the Christmas holiday in vain. But if he was the next coming of that, I still would not take him. I don't care. He's a headache. He only takes 1-year contracts, which is kind of strange. And he's going to be, and he's got the YouTube channel, which he's overly obsessed with. I would wash my hands of that whole thing.
things that we discussed over these couple of months, the ESPN Spectrum dispute with Spectrum cutting off, the very first true weekend of college football, not week 0, but week 1, basically cutting off service at the time that everything was kicking off. Joe Burrow getting the bag before getting injured, but we kind of knew he wasn't healthy by the sign this bag. He did recover, but then gets hurt again, and his season is over. Just like I would say Aaron Rodgers, Joe Burrow, there were a number of quarterbacks that went down this year with injury. This was a brutal year for quarterbacks.
Yeah. Joe Burrow was lucky he signed the contract before he got hurt, because that would have been the end of any long-term contract that he would have gotten. The ESPN Spectrum thing is petty. ESPN is petty. And they've been petty through all the layoffs that they've done.
It's ESPN and Spectrum, two very petty organizations.
Because believe it or not, ESPN needs Spectrum. It's not the opposite. They need the networks to carry them.
Well, the rumor that ESPN might become its own service and go away from TV within a couple of years.
They will die if they become their own, because no one's going to pay for it. We're cutting cords. We talked about this with AJ. I think also that people are cutting cords because they don't want to pay the cable fee anymore. It's too expensive.
Well, I've said this is just going to end up being a reinvention of the wheel and reinvention of cable, even if everyone goes off and does their own thing.
And people don't like to change their watching and viewing habits. Remember that too.
I know. The Colts Taylor thing, the feud between Taylor and oh my God, what's his name? Irsay finally comes to an end with him signing an extension. It's like, yay. I don't know. I still
Irsay's a hypocrite. Irsay is a hypocrite because he believes he's the almighty god of power. But Jim Irsay, who had a DUI like 10 years ago, didn't like the anniversary of the DUI come up recently over a couple of months ago?
And he was asked about it. He was basically saying,
rich white guy,
because he's a rich white guy. Yeah.
Which, by the way, like Jim, you're not helping yourself. Like, just like someone's got to get in Jim's ear and be like, "Shh, stop! You're making it worse."
Billy Epler getting suspended for the whole Phantom IL stuff came up.
The Mets are a mess. And now that they missed out on Yamamoto, and you can't blame Steve Cohen. Steve Cohen put the same offer out there
because they didn't get Ohtani. That's why he didn't go to the Mets. The Marlins, one of the rivals for the Mets, might be in their own little mess after Kim Ng and parted ways.
Good for Kim Ng. I actually like Kim Ng. Kim Ng was actually in the Yankee organization a long time ago.
I know. And she was Derek Jeter's right hand.
And good for Kim Ng. She will find a job wherever she wants to go, and she's well respected for what she does.
Mm-hmm. Hold on. Damian Lillard getting traded to the Bucks. We mentioned before. Comes up. We actually had Paul Lombardi from the 3&D on to a little discussion about that, and then probably the story, according to at least some pop culture outlets when it comes to sports. Kelsey Swift.
Oh boy, this story is just taking over the world, not just in sports and in pop culture. And you know what? The NFL is obsessed because they kept showing commercials of her concert series coming out in the movies, because the NFL is not desperate enough already with making $17 billion. They got to make it $19 billion.
Yep. All right. You know what? For them, they would want to make what? 1989 million, considering that. All right, I'm gonna shake that bad joke off and just give it over to the Clips themselves. We'll come back for a couple of months of Empty the Benches season for 2023.
Happy New Year!
For all the talk that we had trying to basically talk about the depressed running back market, the same one where after that Zoom call, you saw Saquon sign. We're going to talk about Josh Jacobs in a second, ending his holdout. So what I don't understand is those comments made by Jim Irsay, where he's like, "Oh, that basically implying." I don't want to take his words, out of context. So basically implying that, hey, if Jonathan Taylor doesn't want to play for us, we'll move along. I don't understand how you can say that.
Well, they said
and
he's
then
replaceable. He's replaceable by anybody. Is
Right,
essentially
but
what he said.
my point is, I don't understand how you can say that and then go, "Oh, we want a first-round pick for him." Like, I get it. I get the words that I said, and that Jonathan Taylor is the best player on that team. But to say right before that he is replaceable, I mean, there was an offer there supposedly where a couple teams were offering a package with second-round picks. I don't understand why you don't do that trade. And I say that only because I understand best player in team Jonathan Taylor for all his value. Maybe you want the first, but Nick, what have we talked about with taking a running back in the first round?
It doesn't work out because it just doesn't work. You'll be lucky if you get 2.5, 3 years out of a running back at this point. The whole Jonathan Taylor thing is ridiculous. Now, Jim Irsay is the biggest hypocrite of owner. I said it during the stream. He's running up there with Jerry Jones as being one of the more hypocritical owners in all of the NFL. Because Jim Irsay will say horrible, shitty things. And
he's a big mouth.
Also, he should be careful because he should know all about being an asshole with his DUIs. But my point is, Jim Irsay should just shut his mouth. We know he's got the power because he owns the franchise. He makes a decision. And because you didn't take him off the PUP list, now he's out for 4 games and you can't use him anyway. So I can't wait to see all the fantasy drafts.
I'm honestly not surprised that Shohei Ohtani's arm has kind of given out just because of how much he has been used. Then the wear and tear. And honestly, I'm surprised his back is not hurting him for how much he has had to carry this team.
He's got the boulder on his back.
Right. The picture of a guy carrying a boulder, and that's Shohei Ohtani carrying the Angels.
Right. It's crazy. I mean, like, I just don't know. I don't understand. It's one of those things where I'm just like, I'm befuddled because, like, there is a code. You protect the guy so that when he goes into free agency, that he could go hit the market. Is this the Angels saying that, all right, screw him, like, we're not going to get him back. We already know that our team stinks. And on top of that, the consolation prize was that Mike Trout went back on the IL also. So this whole team is a joke. The Ohtani thing is a joke. The man was standing to make the largest contract in MLB history. And the Angels just said, we're going to burn him out for everything. We want all the ticket sales. We want everything on our side. And we don't care if his arm falls off. How many times this last couple of months have we heard all the announcers, all the analysts, everyone say, fatigue, the big F word, fatigue. And no, not the curse word, the fatigue word. Have we heard that? All in his last couple of starts. He's been pulled because he just doesn't have the energy to pitch because he's being overused. And the man has to hit 50 home runs and have an ERA, I think, close to 3, and it's still not enough.
But you know what's funny? This guy has a torn UCL, and he's still hitting bombs. Like, this guy is made of something else. So here's the thing. Because Shohei Ohtani is a two-way player, because Shohei Ohtani is most likely going to be the MVP of the 2023 season, even if he never pitches, another pitch for the rest of the season, like you are saying. Like, he is you're not going to detract the value of Shohei Ohtani. When you have a headline like this, and everyone is talking about the prices of your products, Nick, to the point, and this is something that, we could bring up later, but I think we should bring up now, because we have brought it up previously when talking about ESPN, all the rumors that potentially by 25 or 26, ESPN could say, screw television, and what you see with ESPN Plus, the over-the-top service, could be the future of ESPN.
Here's the problem, and I think I touched on this when we talked about it a couple weeks ago, that people don't want to pay for everything. They're just not going to. But the other thing that's going to be redistributed now because of this issue with Spectrum and ESPN, we've now gotten to a point where we're just going to say, I want this service, I want this, I'm going to pay for this, I want a la carte. I want to be able to go up to the buffet and choose the choices that I want, and I don't want to pay for stupid things, like including, think about this. So you have Amazon for NFL, you have Peacock, you have ESPN Plus, You have if you want to go outside of sports, Netflix, Hulu, like it's a service game. It's a streaming service game. No one, and I hate when, and maybe we're just old men when it comes to this. I like watching TV. I like watching TV. Stop putting everything behind a paywall. I don't care. I just won't watch. I won't watch. It's stupid.
I mean, but it is also the future. But it is the future though, because more people are turning to streaming. And Johnny Montalbano had mentioned that he fears that television is going to go into the same direction that radio is in right now. Which absolutely, he's 100% right. But when you're talking about the a la carte of like, I want this, but when you look at the prices and you add everything up, Nick, you're paying just as much as you would pay for a normal, 800,000 channels of cable. All it is just reinventing the wheel. Urias is a free agent at the end of the year. So, you know what? They can just go, we're done.
Well, yeah, he's going to be gone. And so.
No, but I'm saying, like, this is not the Trevor Bauer situation where we're like, well, it's going to depend. Can they get the moral clause to void the contract? Can they do that? And they still have to do they still have to pay it, even though, they had no idea he was going to get arrested because the guarantees and everything. In this case, they can just wash their hands. But, I mean, Julio Urias, obviously innocent until proven guilty, but the fact that this is a second allegation in a
he's got a record.
Span, right, he's got a record. So he may have just he may have not just played himself out of a new contract. He may have just ousted himself from Major League Baseball with what he's
Get the banner, because we know this is going to happen. So we all know what happens in this situation because Rob Manfred is going to do nothing. And because we say this, because Tom, we haven't said it yet, but Rob, when are you going to do something about this? When are you going to handle it? He's not. Let's just answer it. The question rhetorically.
Would you say the administrative leave is him doing something?
Second incident. You and I were talking about this. Second incident. He got 20 games. 20 games for domestic violence. Hey, Players Association.
You need to shut the fuck up.
I'm so tired of your nonsense defending these players. You defended Franco. You defended Urias. Why are you defending these guys?
It's their job. They are a Players Association.
I don't care. I don't care if it was a murder. I don't care if it was slipping on a banana peel. I don't care. Even though that would be kind of funny to watch an athlete slip on a banana peel. But my point is that I don't care. You shouldn't defend guys who are menaces to society. And Julio Urias is a menace to society.
There's no way he's 100% healthy. He is.
Thank you. Someone finally freaking agrees with me that they rushed him back on the field. And you know what? It's going to impede this year, and it might impede next year.
He's definitely playing through some sort of injury. Now, I give credit to his toughness. At the same time, because he's kind of, I guess, in my opinion, hurt. It ruined his performance. It ruined the performance of Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. I mean, how is it that Tyler Boyd, plays just as much? I mean, now I don't want to disrespect Tyler Boyd, but I just think from the fantasy perspective, Tyler Boyd was on people's waiver wires.
It's true.
Running to grab him at this point.
Here's what I don't get. I think I said it to you when we did our pre-show meetings. The reason he rushed back, he wanted that contract. He wanted to make sure he was signed, that he was on the dotted line. He's got his long-term deal. He's got his guaranteed money.
The Herbert and the Chargers blinked first, so that opened up the opportunity for Burrow, but he didn't want to pass that up.
These quarterbacks are not worth the money that they're being paid. They're not. I'm sorry. Herbert is not worth what he got paid. Burrow's not worth what he got paid. There's only one quarterback that's worth what he got paid. And we all know who that is.
And that is?
Patrick Mahomes.
Yes, absolutely. But now here's my question. Because now we know what Patrick Mahomes is getting paid, Burrow, Herbert, and all of them. What's going to happen when Trevor Lawrence comes up for a contract extension?
And we were looking at a quote from Adam Silver before that. Essentially, he was saying, like, oh, I know as much as the public does. What do you mean you know as much as the public does?
I guess it's under really tight wraps with the police department.
You're the commissioner of the freaking sport. What do you mean you don't know more than us as the public?
Well, here's my question, Nick. Since he is the commissioner of a major organization, a public sports league, just to kind of put the wrinkle, do you feel like the NYPD has a responsibility to put him in, to have him have like first knowledge of everything?
The commissioner of the sport is responsible for the decision. They need to know what's going on before it hits the public and they get a PR nightmare because they screw something up in the process of it.
Which, by the way, Kevin Porter Jr. got arrested in New York City, and the NBA Board of Governors meeting was going on at that time. So, congratulations on the most ineptitude of timing, Mr. Porter. His Achilles is done, and now so is Aaron Rodgers. 4 plays, all of less than 10 minutes of field time, and Aaron Rodgers, that's his 2023 season.
Yeah, I don't know how to react. By the way, the buzzword that they used after the injury was reverberated. His Achilles reverberated, and I was like, this is not a guitar. Like it's an Achilles injury. And I was just like, oh, there goes the season. It reminds me of the Family Guy episode with Stewie sitting at the Met game.
Yeah, and the season's over.
Oh, man. And I'm
But
just
guess
like,
what? You
yeah.
don't have anything to worry about. Your Jets, they can still do something because once again, the starting quarterback for the Jets is the man they've tried to get away from with Zach. Hey, can I date your mom, Wilson? To your point of the season is over, I don't necessarily want to believe that, only because there is still that fighting chance. But it's like what I told you just before we started hitting that record button. At this point, the Jets, to have the kind of success that we thought they could have had this season, it's going to have to be along the lines of that 2000-2001 Ravens team and 12-13 Ravens team that won the Super Bowls. It's going to have to be a defense or bust season, as you put it.
Well, I'll tell you right now, any chances of them being at the AFC level for the title is not happening. It's over. Like they're now going to have to get in probably in a wild card situation now. Because they just don't have the power.
Right, which was still a possibility, even because of how competitive the AFC East is. It was a possibility before when Aaron Rodgers was quarterbacking, but like Sauce Gardner, now all of a sudden the pressure the size of a house is now on his back.
As much as some of us may want to dump on this story because it's pop culture, destructive, this story is a lot more entertaining than the game that was actually played. With the Chiefs and Bears, it was such a blowout that Fox changed the game at halftime.
Well, they removed the game off the affiliates. But
yes.
My point is that it was 41-0 at one point. And Yo Gabba Gabbert was in the game. Well, Mahomes got hurt, which I'm sure everyone was breathing a sigh of collective relief that he wasn't hurt, because that's pretty much that would be the end of their season if he was hurt. But,
oh man, that would change the whole season for the NFL on a dime.
But you see Taylor Swift in the suite, apparently drinking away and eating and like screaming, and she probably knows nothing about football, to be honest.
Well, you know what? Now that all the Swifties are catching on, I mean, Travis Kelce's jersey numbers went up dramatically. Think about all the bank he's making now. I mean, he was already going to be making bank before, and now...
Gee, I wonder why the jersey sales went up. You want to take a guess?
I wonder. But now that the Swifties are all of a sudden... more of them are involved in football. You're seeing all these you're seeing a couple of social media posts that it's like explaining the rules of football. So now we're going to get more people into football, which, I mean, good for the game.
You know what, though? This is going to be a terrible hot take. But you know what I have to say to the Swiftie fans?
You need to shut the fuck up.
Oh, you didn't even give me time to give the danger alarm for the hot take.
Fine, I'll say it again. Hey, Swifties, you know what you need to do?
You need to shut the fuck up.
Oh.
I'm so tired of this because, oh my God, Taylor Swift was at Arrowhead Stadium. Oh my God, Dove Kleeman reported that Taylor Swift's going to be at MetLife Stadium for Monday Night Football.
Sunday Night Football.
I mean, Sunday Night Football, whatever.
It was absolutely crazy just because I just always going to picture Damian Lillard as a Portland Trailblazer. I feel like I was in denial too with his trade demands, that I really couldn't picture him on another team. But I think that this is a really good fit. It was a very interesting trade though on the Trailblazers' part. I thought that they didn't get like almost anything back. They ended up getting 1 first-round pick back. Rudy Gobert ended up costing the Timberwolves 5 first-round picks. So when you want to compare the two of those, it makes it a lot more interesting. But man, this was absolutely crazy. I was shocked, and I didn't even know that the Bucks were in the race. We had been hearing the rumors about the Heat. We had been hearing the rumors about the Raptors over the last couple of days that they were like on like the 1 yard line or something like that within a trade. But it's the Bucks coming out of nowhere, and it's insane.
Well, let's go to the other part of this equation. If you had to take the temperature of Miami Heat fans right about now, how do you, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being cold and 10 being Miami Heat hot, how hot would you say that Miami fans are right about now?
Oh, they're easily a 15, probably. I think Jimmy Butler's reaction and Tyler Hero's reactions kind of spoke for themselves. I mean, Jimmy Butler kind of went on the mic and was saying that like the Bucks should. I think he was saying it jokingly, but like there was a little bit of sore loser in it. The way that he was saying it kind of went on Twitter and was just like the Bucks need to be looked at for tampering.
Oh, please.
And then Tyler Hero responded back and he like agreed with Jimmy Butler. I assume that it was a joke. I assume that it was like Jimmy Butler's attempt at trying to be funny throughout the entire situation, but like
not the first time from Jimmy either.
Exactly.
No, and here's my response, Jimmy. I forgot to laugh. That was so funny.
Here's my favorite part of this story already, Nick. The practice of placing players on the IL with fake injuries is a long accepted but ethically murky part of baseball, according to sources. Teams will ask players, often struggling and on the fringe of a roster, to accept an IL placement even when capable of playing, sources said. The player gains the benefit of service time, a major league salary, and retaining a spot on the team's 40-man roster, while the team retains the player amid a potential 26-man roster crunch. He got to the second paragraph, and he said the quiet part out loud. We have seen this before, not just with the New York teams. Passan said it. This is a common practice that's often accepted, although it's supposed to be very hush hush, but everyone seems to know about it. My question here is Major League Baseball where's my banner here whenever I need it? There you go, good old Rob Manfred. Is he in Major League Baseball using Billy Epler? Like, is this going to be setting an example or sort of a crackdown into that so-called phantom IL people?
See, I think this is wrong because the issue you're running into now is, so you exposed Billy Epler as the Mets GM, saying that he was using this as a phantom injured list.
Yeah.
Excuse me. That I'm so choked up over this. That you're going to call him. You got to call everybody else out now. You can't just call him out. You can make an example of him if you want, but now you got to go call every other GM, every other person, executive who's done this. You got to call them out.
Which means basically we're going to be left with no general managers in baseball.
He's fat! He's fat! He's fat! He's fat! He's fat!
I mean, this story speaks for itself, really. I mean, Clippers trying to pursue Harden from the 76ers. From the 76ers, they're pretty much going to ask for a king's ransom. If I'm the Clippers, I basically say you have nobody left. And if you really want him off the team, you will take 0.3 of a dollar and call it a day. Now, if I'm the Clippers, I don't understand why you want him at all. You're already dealing with your own headache in Kawhi and Paul George. Why would you want to deal with a third headache? Someone answer this for me, because I don't know. Why would you want James Harden?
No idea whatsoever.
James Harden is such a joke. Like I feel like I've used
most overrated player in the NBA. I've said it 1,000 times.
And you and I have seen a lot of overrated players in our Knicks and Nets over the years. Kyrie Irving, KD. We've seen some pretty overrated players come through this town. But
yeah, it's
James Harden actually showed up to camp
looking fat.
Looking
He's fat!
We need another star. We just need another star to go with Kawhi and with PG-13 and all that.
They don't play already. So you're going to add another guy who doesn't give a shit.
I was going to say, a Kawhi, PG-13, James Harden big three might be one of the worst big threes I've ever seen.
It's
if
all
not the worst.
it's all ego, it's all injury, and it's all players who think about themselves. Great trio.
And it's all load management, even though the NBA is cracking down on that.
There's a couple of different sounds I could really play for this here. Well, one is because yes, he got paid. Two, I would say,
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
for Jim Irsay. For Irsay. And then the third and final one I would play
Why
is
the fuck you lying? Why you always lying? Oh my God. Stop you fucking lying.
now you're probably wondering why I hit that sound effect for the third, because Jim Irsay's a liar. A big fat liar. Because
or as they say in that one Family Guy episode, hey everybody, he's a big phony. He's a big fat phony.
yes, because Jim Irsay said, like you just said, well, he's never coming back here. I'll find any essentially 2-bit running back to put in the place of Jonathan Taylor. He says, really? Then why didn't you let him sit out all season, Jim? Jim, why'd you let him come back? Why'd you pay him? Go ahead. Go ahead, Jim. I'm waiting. I'm waiting for a response. That's right. You don't have a response.
No. What's going to happen is he's going to try and say something, and then you're going to take the microphone back.
You
and you're
need
gonna
to shut the fuck up!
So this is, I can never pronounce her name, Kaisir Gondrezic, a former WNBA player, I think was the woman he was dating. Quote, he never balled his fists up and hit me. That's so now we're getting into semantics whether he hit you or not.
Well, there's more. Is that what was being reported that he did? Like,
it was. Well, I don't know if you remember from the story. So, like, he did it. And supposedly, either the brother made the threats on social media, which Tom and I came out and said that was wrong. You could be angry behind the scenes if your sister's getting hit. But don't make threats on social media. That's the last thing you want to do. The other quote that she said, and he definitely didn't punch me in the face numerous times. That is a lie. I don't have any injuries to support that. Why would you say that after all the pop-up circumstance that came out from it? Why?
Yeah.
That's not adding up to me at all. So
there's something that's missing, and that now doesn't make a lot of sense in all of this.
So it says Porter was arrested after the alleged attack, initially charged with multiple felonies, including assault and strangulation. However, Manhattan prosecutors dropped one of the assault charges Monday after acknowledging Porter did not fracture Gondrzic's neck vertebrae during the incident. Porter still faces charges of second-degree strangulation and third-degree assault, to which he has pleaded not guilty.
So, but So technically, this is kind of semantics then, because saying he didn't hit me still, doesn't take that strangulation out if you really want to go technical here.
And it says a police spokesperson said shortly after the alleged attack that officers were informed Gondrizek sustained a laceration to the right side of her face and was complaining about pain to her neck. And she was transported to the hospital for evaluation. All right, I'm confused now. This was a mutual option, just so people understand her contract situation. She had an option, and the Marlins had an option. The Marlins picked up the option. Kim Eng declined her option to come back. So she's gone. Now, there was a lot of quotes that came out on Twitter that her and Bruce Sherman, who is the official owner of the Marlins, they don't see the eye to eye of the shape of the organization. Now, who's Bruce Sherman? Bruce Sherman knows nothing about baseball at all. He's a businessman.
He's a businessman, yeah.
So why would you disagree with someone who's really turned tables as the first female GM in the sport? Took a playoff team in the Marlins. And now you're just going to let her walk scot-free? Bye.
So are we going to have another fire sale with the Marlins?
That's a good question. I don't really know.
Look at what she did with that team. You had the batting champion this year in Arias. I mean, that trade, which actually worked out great for both teams, the Arias for Lopez trade, worked out great for Miami. They've had some other great pieces in there. I think Jazz Chisholm's been a very, I know he was hurt this year, but Jazz Chisholm's a very solid ball player. They've got some pieces there. And again, you talk about, them being a good team in that NL East that had 3 formidable opponents in it going into the year. And I just, when I first heard this, and then I, like you, Nick, I tried following all the sides to this, it makes me think that the Marlins are going to be doing something. They're going to kind of blow this up again.
So the story comes out that Harden is back with the Sixers ahead of the Thursday opener, but the Sixers said, that's okay, you stay home. And that was kind of a misconception, which Shams Charania put out there. And now the reports, now that Woj had to confirm on top, Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN say, oh, well, he has to stay back at the facilities and get going because he basically refused to come to camp and refused to be at training camp. This is an endless saga. It's really what it is. And I really don't know what to say. And he's got to ramp it up. The only reason he's on the court is because he wants the money. He wants to be traded. He wants to be traded.
He's going to play in order to get traded. So I'm not surprised that this saga ends with Harden just playing for the Sixers anyway. I don't think Shams, to the point of that you were going on, Nick, about the tweet, the reports. I don't think Shams meant to, deceive anybody. Yeah, mislead anybody. I think that it was just a matter of the information that he had or the way he worded it. I don't think he was trying to do anything like that. But it does go to show the importance of wording the tweet. But again, if he didn't have the information, if he wasn't sure why, unless he should have been more clear of that, like, I don't know why he's saying that.
I mean, I said this to Tom before we started. Shams and Woj are in the insider business. Like, people are watching those two guys, whether it's for gambling purposes, whether it's for news purposes, whether it's for fantasy purposes. I feel bad for the people who have James Harden in fantasy right now. They want to know that the news is accurate. And people are going to say, well, Nick, that's not misleading. Yeah, it is. It's misleading because the two sides are arguing. And when you say that he's not going to be on the trip, that looks bad.
All right. Last 2 months of 2023. Some of our most recent episodes to look back. Clippers, of course, make the acquisition for Harden. So, you know what? I guess we ended the September-October clips on a good point of James Harden. We're saying, oh, he's only returning to get traded. Because guess what? How we start November, December, he gets traded to the Clippers. And I had referred to it as probably the worst big three I had ever laid my eyes on.
Yes, but at the same time, they're now making us eat our words because they're now playing good basketball, which I did not expect.
Yeah, well, you know what? Let's see when the second half of the season comes.
Oh, no.
Still plenty of time.
I still don't think they're going to go anywhere because that just sounds James Harden and playoffs doesn't sound like it ends too well, including that horrible game where they went 0 for 28 from 3-point land when he was with the Rockets. But
yeah.
but
NFL halfway checkpoint where we talked about the Jets and Bills seasons and showed some concerns for the Bills considering the way they were playing. Now, they've picked up the pace a little bit, but as of the time we're recording this, because we're recording this right before the Week 16 matchups start up, they're still on the outside looking in technically. They're like 8-6 with like 5 other teams, and they would still miss the playoffs as of if the season ended right now.
well, what did they say? Like 26 or 27 teams are still technically in the playoff race?
Technically right before Week 16. That's probably gone way down once this airs.
No, but it's still an insane amount of teams at the
Yeah.
time. Like the Bills, their defensive line got smacked big time. Injuries. Josh Allen didn't look great. He was throwing a lot of picks, a lot of touchdowns, a lot of picks. They beat the Cowboys as of late, which was a big win for them. And it looks like they kind of found it a little bit again. But since their D-line is not healthy, they're not going to beat those big teams ahead of them. I just don't think. Playoffs is a different monster.
You also have, speaking of NFL injuries, we talked about the Joe Burrow injury, which ended up getting its own investigation. The Bengals ended up cleared from that, but it still was noteworthy seeing him with the sling on him or the wrap on him, whatever it was. And Deshaun Watson, he was another quarterback that went down with injury. And the fact of the matter is, and we talked about this on Football Friday, with Dorian Thompson, PJ Walker, and now Joe Flacco, the Browns have still played great even without him there and without Nick Chubb as well.
Yeah, the Browns have been, I don't know if you would say they're the story of the year when it comes to the NFL. It's remarkable what they've done defensively. And now Flacco taking over. And then, they kind of were playing quarterback musical chairs the past couple of games.
Right.
But
it's amazing with those 3 quarterbacks, they've done just what they could have done, if not even more than with Watson at the helm. So, and I think it was you and Johnny talk about it. Man, it's still, not only is it an outlier, it's a really bad blemish.
it's an albatross is the word I would use when it comes to his ego off the field, his contract. It's not good.
And you still claim that you live rent free. Is that?
Yeah, because he has not unblocked me.
A couple of years.
I mean, I could see the account for some reason, but it says unblocked. Yeah, Deshaun, you'll never be a top 5 quarterback, so you can block me all you want. It's not going to make you a better player.
Ooh. Hold on 1 second. I have a response to this, but I need the soundboard.
Shots fired! Shots fired!
Thanks, Mike.
That contract is always going to be an albatross. He will never be able to live up to it.
We also had Jim Harbaugh getting suspended, which I think you and Johnny talked about too. The whole, it's almost like the Spygate with Belichick.
Yeah, and now we're seeing that Harbaugh is rumored to be taking an NFL job, possibly the Chargers or the Bears, or even though he just signed a contract with Michigan, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so if that's going to go anywhere, especially considering that Michigan is going to be playing on New Year's, taking on Alabama as part of the Final Four for the playoffs.
Yeah, and obviously you had the controversy with the 4 teams, and now FSU is suing the ACC and the College Football Playoff Committee, and it's a giant mess, and it's all back to one thing.
The money!
So that's all it is, and unfortunately, Alabama shouldn't have been in, but you knew they weren't going to let that conference not have a team.
Well, if they didn't let Alabama in after Alabama beat Georgia, there wouldn't have been an SEC school in that form. You knew they weren't going to let that happen.
But that's that sentence right there is the problem with the College Football Committee. They can't live without an SEC. You can, you just choose not to.
And now we're going to see that as they expand it to 12 teams next year.
Oh, so they would have made it if it was a 12. then you're going to run into team 13 and 14 now are going to become a controversy. It's like March Madness.
Well, what did I say the week after? Whenever my return episode was. You know what's funny? The system that we grew up, Nick, where you just pick the two teams. This year, that would have right. This year, the least controversy because Michigan was undefeated and Washington was undefeated. That would have been it.
Yeah, you're talking about the BCS computer system. Yeah.
It would have been Michigan and Washington championship game, and I would have been very satisfied with that.
Yeah, I think they're trying too hard by having a committee where they vote for the teams. And I've said this to you when we did the episode, and I said it to Johnny, and I said it to Nick D. Also, what's the point of having wins and losses if you're just going to rank the wins and the losses? And they went undefeated. I will never understand this. FSU went undefeated, and they didn't make it.
Well, you know what? The Lakers are putting up an in-season tournament champions banner. So Florida put up an undefeated banner and a champions banner if they beat Georgia in their bowl game.
Don't even get me started. The Lakers raising a banner for the in-season tournament. And then how many do we have left? Because I have one more tidbit to add to this also.
Okay, so let me quickly go through. We mentioned Belichick. We mentioned the Chargers job. Well, it seems like the Bills. I mean, let me start that again. It seems like Bill Belichick and the Pats might be parting ways at the end of the season. There was smoke, but now, with the reports from NBC Sports Boston, now it's turning into a little bit of fire. There might be some truth to that. Draymond Green, speaking of the NBA, Draymond Green getting suspended indefinitely, and now it looks like at least 3 weeks officially after he undergoes all this counseling. So that's a mess.
They officially call that the I word, the indefinitely word, which is not a word you hear very often. Yeah, that situation's not good. The Warriors just re-signed him this past offseason to a $100 million deal. Stupid, by the way. There was no market. They were competing and negotiating against themselves. They should have told Draymond, all right, go out and get the best deal you want. You find it, you got it.
Well, that's not the only NBA controversy that came up this past month. Josh as well. This is a situation like Wander Franco's. Yeah,
the whole thing with Josh Giddey and getting back on the court and being cheered. Really?
Sometimes a team allegiance just makes, mind.
You know what's crazy in the NBA when these allegations happen to anybody? They play right away. In any other sport, they're forced to sit out.
Mm-hmm. And then we got, of course, a couple of baseball headlines that ended with their off season underway. Let's talk about where Shohei Ohtani will land, and he signs that massive record deal with the Dodgers, batting that's $700 million, 10 years, $680 million of that deferred, and then the Yankees going and trading for Juan Soto.
By the way, for quick math, for people who aren't math majors, 97% of that contract is deferred.
Yep.
For Shohei Ohtani. So just keep that in mind that he's making $2 million a year for 10 years and then $68 million a year for 10 years following. And
of course, Nick, with all that deferred money, that opened the door for the Dodgers to land Yamamoto, because it seems like, according to MLB Network, on a report, at least the day we're recording, is the day that Yamamoto signed. Apparently, Yamamoto was intrigued by the Dodgers as much as he was courting the two New York teams. Once the Ohtani deal came in, all of a sudden his eyes went towards there because he wanted to play with Ohtani. He wanted to play with a fellow Japanese player.
You know what? Like the Dodgers are going to be the team to beat for the next at least 5 to 6 years.
But let's see them have some postseason success and not choke in the postseason.
Well, obviously, absolutely, 100% that they got to go to the playoffs. I said to you before we started that there's a giant boulder on the Dodgers' back, and everyone is going to be pulling the bullseye on the Dodgers' back because everyone's going to want to beat them because they spent over $1 billion. Let me say that again. Over $1 billion.
Hold on.
Yeah. It's like a lottery victory. One more story I'd like to add also, going back to the NBA, because we were talking about this, because this is just, how do we end the year without talking about this? The Detroit Pistons. Just
I know. It's technically not a clip because we never had a chance to really talk about it, but 5 straight losses. Sell the team chant. They've got 2 wins this whole season as of the time we're recording this.
and also as of the time we're recording this, there was a bet on the DraftKings Sportsbook for not winning a game the rest of the year, plus 10,000. Which means if you bet $1, you win 100. If you bet 100, you win 10,000. Like,
well,
I don't think that's going to happen.
You know what's funny, Nick? I was just talking to a friend about this the other day. You think back to the 2000s, and you got the Tigers who, were in the World Series in 2006, and they had we thought maybe a pretty good chance at winning that World Series. The 2008, the Red Wings were hockey gods, going to back-to-back Stanley Cups, winning one of them. Obviously, the Lions ended up going 0-16, and it's like after that 0-16, after that World Series loss, and after the Red Wings lost the Stanley Cup to the Penguins in 2009, it's like after that, and actually, if you keep forgetting, we're talking about the Pistons. 2004, the first time I ever really got the experience of the Pistons, them pulling off the greatest upset of Shaq and Kobe in the final year of that Lakers dynasty. And after that, like once we get to the 2010s, that city,
it nosedived.
Complete nosedive. Now the Lions have started to turn things around. The Tigers we thought would have a good young team, but it seems like nothing's played out. The Red Wings are in rebuild mode, and the Pistons, my God, it's been 20 years. Think about it. I'm seeing it. It's like 9-year-old me is seeing them pull off that. It's like, wow, there's a chance that this Pistons team could be the next big thing. And well, you only need to watch the Collapse series from Secret Base, that episode on the Pistons, to see where that's gone.
I mean, people forget Rip Hamilton, Chauncey Billups, Ben Wallace, Rasheed Wallace, which was a heck of a foursome on a team, and they had a great bench, and it was just an incredible team. And people forget Detroit was the bad boys team way back when, also in the 90s, not anymore. But I just don't see them winning double-digit games this year. They're so bad.
So this is going to be Charlotte Bobcats level bad.
God, I haven't heard the Charlotte Bobcats because they're not even called that anymore. But like, it's been a long time, but yes, they're that bad. They are terrible. Or as Charles likes to say, TRBL. Terrible.
Terrible. All right. But you know what's not terrible? Looking at these last clips of some of our more recent episodes that closed out 2023. Take a look.
James Harden will always be overrated. He's never going to win a title. I'm willing to, and I know he's still got years on his career. I'm willing to stamp it, and we can, you know how they say, like, put a mark on this on an episode? I'm willing to say that he's never going to win an NBA title.
So I'm actually not going to challenge that because, Nick, here is my question. And I think I've questioned this in the reports in previous reports about the Clippers being interested in the 76ers. First of all, I mean, somehow they managed to make it work where they didn't have to trade either Kawhi or PG-13. But let's think about this, Nick. You've got Kawhi Leonard, who has been Mr. Injury, Mr. Load Management for a couple of seasons now. And by his words towards Adam Silver and the new rules being implemented, he's basically implying that if he's not 100%, he'll continue to do it. Basically, kind of hinting there is a chance maybe he will continue load management.
Even with the new rules that say you have to provide an actual, almost, and this is going to sound stupid, like a doctor's note, in a sense, saying I can't play.
Mm-hmm.
But
there's that. No, hold on, because there's him. There's Paul George, who, if I can be really honest with you, Nick, his star has kind of faded for me. He's kind of faded in the background in this Los Angeles team.
Yeah, Paul George, who was with the Pacers for most of his career, had really good teams. They made a lot of runs to the playoffs, including against my Nets, which they had really good series against. Gets traded to OKC, does nothing there. then ends up in LA as a free agent in the offseason because that's where he's from. Other players going to LA because that's where they're from. Excuse me.
So also, I know he was an all-star this season, but popularity contest.
Okay. The all-star, becoming an all-star is a facsimile. I could care less about, okay, so you're a 10-time all-star. Big deal. Did you win a title? Just to look around at, unfortunately, my divisional realm of the AFC.
Well, Nick. Nick, let's start with something positive. Be thankful you are not the Patriots.
That's a good point. I can't dispute that. You're right.
The Patriots 2-7. The Jets are 500 at this point, 4-4. I believe they are
4-4.
4-4. Okay. I'd say they had their bye week already.
Yes.
Yeah, week 7 they had their bye week. So 4-4. Obviously, the loss to the Chargers was pretty bad, but you know what, Nick? Look, it goes back to what I said. The Chargers can be a good team. The Chargers could be one of the top teams in the AFC if they wanted. Well, I say if they wanted to. I say if it wasn't for a certain somebody at the head coaching position.
Right, but you can't blame everything on the coach. I mean, the guy's got to play too.
Okay, so maybe some things haven't gone well with the Chargers.
But I want to say something else, though, because the Bills, even though they've had a lot of injuries, they've been a massive disappointment to me so far.
Oh, I agree. Say what you want, Nick, about your Jets. I think even with the Jets behind the Bills in the standings, I think the Bills are the biggest disappointment of this NFL season.
I mean, let's be fair. They've had a lot of major injuries, including Josh Allen at times, too, being hurt.
Right. But granted, Nick, let's compare this Bills and Jets team, because the defense, Nick, for as much as they let up against the Chargers, they still are a top team they still are a top defense in the NFL.
Can I give you a stat quickly from the Monday Night Football game? They lost by 3 touchdowns, and they didn't even give up 200 yards. 190 yards total. And they lost by 3 touchdowns. That's caliber defense.
As far as the suspension, though, here's just what I don't get. Now, I feel in some ways they didn't go after the university hard enough, because first off, it should not be on the players. You
can't ban the players here at all.
But what you could do, though, is either come down harder on the head coach, because what you only did was suspend him for 3 games for the second time this year, by the way. But he's allowed to be at the practices throughout the week.
See, that made no sense to me whatsoever. If you're going to suspend somebody, they're suspended. There's no in between. Either they're not allowed to be there, they're suspended, no walkthroughs, even though with technology today, anyone can do anything off the field. Yeah. But there shouldn't be allowed to be part of the playbook or the strategy at all. Gone. Suspended. And by the way, second time, like you just said, being suspended 3 games.
Yeah.
Now, the first one I think was a little bit overzealous, if I really had to have an opinion on it. I think it had to do with him paying for a meal for a college recruit
thing. No, that's always been.
But come on! I always found that to be stupid.
You're coming up from that, absolutely. But I think the other thing with the suspension too is it needed to be harsher on the university. If you go after, and we're not even talking about money, but you talk about like recruiting, you talk about that kind of stuff. If you go down hard on that, that's more of an impact than saying suspending Harbaugh for 3 games when he can still be at the practices throughout the week.
It's $230 million wasted. Let's just be real here. It's a fully guaranteed contract that people don't realize that this is now going to affect, going forward, contracts for quarterbacks. Because who's going to want to give a fully guaranteed contract? First of all, have we ever seen a fully guaranteed quarterback contract before?
Not like this. I mean, you want to see Joe Burrow's contract, but that's not fully guaranteed. A lot of it is, but not all of it.
I just never heard a fully guaranteed contract over $200 million. Basically, the Browns just flushed $230 million down the toilet.
Yeah, and the Texans seem to have gotten the best out of that, because now look at the situation they're in, and they got multiple first-round picks on top of that, too.
And look at Stroud. I mean, like, he looks great.
Can the Browns still make the playoffs without Watson? And right now, I think that takes a hit. Now, their defense is going to keep them in these games, but a true test, I think, is going to be coming up this Sunday when they take on the Steelers.
I mean, I hate to make this comparison because I don't like. They're the Jets now.
Well, it's funny you say that because that is actually what I would compare them to right now. Both teams great defensively, but offensively, quarterback's a major question. And that brings up another factor into all this too. Kevin Stefanski comes out on Wednesday, and they announced that they are going to Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the 5th rounder, to start, and not P.J. Walker. I thought that was
what?
I saw that. I could not believe. When I heard and read that they were going to DTR over PJ Walker.
Yeah, Stefanski has been very questionable in coaching decisions, and I just feel like he's made some boneheaded decisions with this team. Like their defense, the reason I said it reminds me of the Jets. Cleveland has a really, really good defense. Like I don't know if this is a hot take, but I would say better than the Jets. Actually,
yeah, I agree with you. I think that they're the best defense in the National Football League. That's how
I think Garrett is Defensive Player of the Year. I think
he's one of my guys up there. I mean, I would put him up there. I would put Crosby from the Raiders. I would put T.J. Watt from Pittsburgh in that discussion. But yeah, no, Myles Garrett's definitely got to be discussed. And the Browns will definitely have a chance to win games here, no matter who they're playing, because of that defense. But now without Watson, I mean,
this was interesting. So I'm sure, like me, you were on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, and you saw a video of him in a brace walking into the facility, and you probably were saying, huh?
The Bengals need to be fined for this. I mean, this is a clear, I mean, they have to disclose these injuries, and they clearly were covering it up. The spread was 3.5. If this knowledge was public, the spread would have been a lot bigger. I didn't bet this game on an app or anything, but I am in a football pool, and I was winning that pool. I was in first place. The reason I'm not in first place anymore is because I had the Bengals.
DraftKings, by the way, has been really good about this with injuries, and also the Bijan Robinson thing when he was sick. DraftKings has been really good about integrity, like giving bets back to.
Yeah.
FanDuel, not so much, at least from what I've heard. Like FanDuel just said, screw you, we're taking your money. I think this would have been like 6 or 7. I think
at least, I mean, if we had known he was injured, but teams are like I said, they're required to disclose all injuries.
The injury list. Yeah.
I mean, gambling is the biggest reason is one of the biggest reasons they have to do that, because otherwise, how can betting odds accurately be made if a team is covering up an injury?
And also, what about the individuals? Like if you put bets on Burrow.
Yeah, that too. I mean, how can you fairly make a prop bet on Joe Burrow not knowing he was injured? We were essentially defrauded into betting these games, not by the betting companies or anything, but
by the NFL.
In effect.
It's a bad look for the NBA. They already have the bad look from John Morant with the guns, and now they have to deal with an inappropriate relationship. Now, let me point out the stupidity people are trying to claim in this story, which is, oh, well, Oklahoma City has a age 16 consent. Shut up.
It doesn't only involve Oklahoma.
Right. It involves California because, and you're going to love this one, they were in nightclubs together. And we all know who the big man in charge is not going to do anything. He's just going to sit there on his throne. Yes, it's an Adam Silver's. Well, we can't say it's an Adam Silver slip up technically yet because he hasn't done anything.
It's going to be an Adam Silver slip up because now listen. Here's what I'm going to say about this, and I think I have used this kind of viewpoint and reasoning when it comes to stories like this, where you got inappropriate relationships, or you got sexual misconduct, or the dreaded four-letter R word. You know, I understand the anxiety. I understand the trepidation about talking to others, authorities, police, about the matter. The problem here is essentially what you are kind of trying to say is that by not cooperating with the authorities, number one, they can't do anything about it, obviously. But number two, now instead of Josh Giddey getting punished because of an actual legal matter, which this still is a legal matter, but as you kind of alluded to, what they're basically going to be doing in terms of disciplining him is, I want to say slap on the wrist. It's either one, a slap on the wrist, or two, you're going to force, as I just told you before we started recording, Nick, you're going to force the Oklahoma City Thunder's hand because, as you just kind of said, after what we saw with the John Morant case, do you really expect that this guy is going to do anything?
In my opinion, this is not a good deal at all. It's not a good deal. They traded Michael King, who I think was one of their next up-and-coming stars, out of bullpen. Could have been a starter, too, by the way. I think he actually was a starter. They need help with pitching. This does not solve the pitching crisis that's going on with the Yankees.
Nick, what team did you watch last season? Because as far as I could tell, it was the hitting that needed the issues. And I think I know what you're going to say about the bullpen and everything with towards the end of last season. I think the problem with that is because they expended the bullpen so much.
If he goes into free agency and the deal is so ridiculous that the Yankees basically have to say, sayonara, there's the door, then this deal it gets an F.
I will agree with that. However, I think what you've done now is I have expressed my concerns about what happens if Cole opts out. This may be a really bad take, but I think what this deal does, even if Cole opts out, Soto is your main priority now. Especially because, Nick, and this is the other thing I should have gone on before, I don't think they do this deal unless they think Yamamoto is in the bag. And as of right now, Yamamoto and the Yankees are scheduled to have a meeting on Monday. I don't think it's much a question of how much. I think that's going to play a part of it, but I think the big question right now is where. I think that's what everyone is speculating at this point, and I think that's what everyone is waiting on bated breath, including some of these remaining free agents out there, including Cody Bellinger. I think we're waiting on this. What is going to happen with Shohei Ohtani? How much money is he going to get is one, but also where is he going to land? You got some teams that are in play, Nick. We've got the Dodgers. We have the Giants. We have the Angels, of course. And apparently we now have the Blue Jays, too, who have been exploring possible options. Now, I have said from the beginning, Nick, that I think the Dodgers, Ohtani are a perfect match. Unfortunately, there's been some controversy this week because obviously I don't know if we talked about it. Ohtani's request that everything has to stay quiet.
On the down low, which I don't blame him. You don't want everything getting leaked.
Unfortunately, Dave Roberts opened his mouth during a recent press conference and admitted that the two sides have been in talks. Ohtani is going to go where Ohtani is going to want to go. Ohtani is going to go to a place, Nick, where he's going to get a lot of money. And I think, Nick, as much as money is going to play a big role in this and maybe the primary role, I think after 6 years of suffering on the Angels, losing at the Angels, I think being on a playoff team or a contender is also going to play somewhat of a role in here.
I agree. I think it's going to be somewhere West Coast. I think you could throw away all the East Coast teams. Like you're hearing the Blue Jays and all these rumors. You could cancel those out. That's not going to happen.
Here's the thing about the Blue Jays, Nick. You know, we talk about they have mentioned, I think on MLB Network, that what's good about the Blue Jays, the Rogers Center, is it's a dome. So he doesn't have to worry about his workout routines and everything getting screwed up. The problem is when we talk about contender, Nick, how many years have we been saying it's the Blue Jays' time, it's the Blue Jays' time, and they just continue to underperform. And Nick, weren't we not just talking about like last month, all these rumors that Vlad Jr. and Bichette were going to get shipped? We've debated about this on Football Friday. We have debated about this on the show. We got this off camera in our own little conversations outside the podcast world. But now it's like when there's smoke, there's fire. And it's becoming more and more, again, I don't want to say clear because I don't want to say that this is actually happening. But the inevitability comes stronger and stronger that this seems to, you wouldn't think it would be it because why would Bill Belichick want to go out on a season like this? But it appears to be almost a reality now.
Yeah, I mean, I said this to you before we started that 20 seasons, 20 plus seasons, 6 rings, a ton of playoff runs, a dynasty, him and Tom Brady. He doesn't have to prove himself anymore. He won 6 rings. That's more than enough to prove to a fan base that you did everything you needed. The only reason he lasted as long as he did is because of the 6 rings and because of the playoff runs. Otherwise, he wouldn't be here anymore.
You're right. And I'll be honest, this is a fireable kind of season. We have seen head coaches fired for these kinds of seasons, but as you kind of alluded to, he's won Super Bowls. He and Tom Brady, now we can have this debate again about would Bill Belichick have had the same kind of success if have Tom Brady, but the point is, he is one of the most winningest coaches in NFL history. He is one of the most successful head coaches in NFL history.
I watched the video quite a few times. Some of his aggressiveness is sometimes just flailing arms, and it looks worse than it does. Again, it's a little tough with this one. It does look like he flails his arms because he's trying to create space. But because of his reputation, he's not going to win.
Yeah, no. Nick, wasn't it just last season? There was a whole off-the-court conflict within the Warriors. It
was the off-season
between him and Poole.
That was before he got traded to the Wizards.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, but Jordan Poole was being a jerk, too.
Yeah,
not that I'm saying that Draymond Green is warranted.
Right,
but,
I was gonna say, but as you kind of alluded, Draymond Green has had a reputation that follows him.
And that's the problem, that he's got such a shitty reputation when it comes to the league that anything he does going forward is going to either be fined or suspended. Now, on top of it, if you're watching on the video right now, it says indefinitely. This is a strategy that has been used by the Dodgers before, and
they have it right now.
They've done it. Yeah, they've done it with Mookie. They've done it. Yeah, and they've done it with all their stars, and it pays off for them because they have more money that they can go out and spend. Now, let's be careful. It doesn't mean that it's not on their cap and it's not on their books. It's just pushed much further out into the future.
Yeah, it's gonna be a hard time for the Dodgers once the $68 million a year actually kicks in. But as you kind of alluded to, Ohtani is doing this, and they're doing this as a means of trying to get other stars. I mean, right now, the Dodgers are in just as advanced talks as the Yankees about Yamamoto.
And by the way, they're talking about Yamamoto at $300 million plus at the beginning of this negotiating period. I mean, I heard that they had their meeting, I think at the beginning of earlier this week at the beginning, and apparently Freeman and Betts and Ohtani were all at that meeting. Oops.
Yeah, that's why I was so confident that the Yankees were going to get him. Now after this, I don't know about that now.
By the way, if that happens, we're talking about $1 billion being spent by the Dodgers in the offseason. $1 billion.
And that's going to do it for 2023. Our year is officially over. And I'll do it just like I did for when the actual episode starting to was officially over for us. So, here to tell you that next week, 1 week from today, January 4th, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, as always, is the return of Empty the Bench as we kick off our 2024 season.
Yeah, this is going to be crazy. We're back. The football season is, a month from ending, essentially. Football Friday has continued through the break. Obviously, we're going to head into the playoffs. We'll take you all the way through our Super Bowl special, which usually we put out the day before.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll keep rolling all the way into March. We'll have a March Madness special. We have quite a few people who want to do a bracket special, so we'll go through that as well. And then we'll roll back into baseball season, and then we'll be back into the summer months. So a lot to look forward to.
Can't wait for it. So make sure to tune in next week, January 4th, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. We'll see you there. But for now, let's put a row on 2023. You hit that like button, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you get notified of everything here at the Empty the Bench Network. Make sure to follow us across social media at ETB Sports on Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok. Make sure to follow the network at ETB Network on Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok. Go to youtube.com/ETB Network. Hit that subscribe button for all of you who are listening to us on the audio-only platforms. We just passed 650 subscribers. We thank you all for your support. Those of you who are watching us on our YouTube home, go to those audio-only platforms, Acast, Spotify, Apple, so much more. Take Empty the Bench with you on the road. Go to etbpodcast.com for more information about the website. For our official website for more information about the network. Blogs from some of our contributors and so much more. Make sure to follow Nick and I across at Ed Morgasen Radio at Thomas J. Albano. And that is officially a wrap. That is that. So,
Holy cow.
Yeah, anything else you want to say, Nick, before I wrap it up?
Just Happy New Year. Hopefully everyone stays safe. And we'll see you in 2024 when the madness starts all over again.
Happy 2024, people. For Nick, I'm Tom. We'll see you next week. Take care, everyone.
Happy New Year.